What does creativity look like in the classroom? Does it look like jumping on desks?
Why do I stand up here?
Is it doing artsy projects like drawing posters or animating things? Does it look like tearing up tests? Is it doing something with technology? Is it doing anything at all? Should we just let students be free to do what they want?
And that's the beauty of college. You can say whatever you want. You can be whatever you want.
We live in a world that is unfortunately dominated by standardized tests. It's also dominated by quantifiable teaching methods and rigorous expectations for students to perform for extrinsic purposes. Students also have a high expectation placed on them to be creative, to think outside the box, and to get ready for the 21st century workplace that involves a lot of technology and a whole lot of collaboration with people across the globe. But just how do we as teachers foster creativity in a meaningful way? One that has tangible applications to the classroom. I mean, what is creativity really? And what exactly does it look like? Most often when someone hears the word creative in education, they think of art or music or dance. While creativity is certainly not limited to these areas, I do think it's a good place to start because that is where a lot of people have expectations and an understanding of what creativity looks like. If we're going to think about creativity across the curriculum, it's best to start there in the arts where we already have a bit of an understanding of what creativity can look like. Twyla Tharp is a New York City-based choreographer whose award-winning work has been seen in film, television, and Broadway. In addition to putting together some of the most memorable choreographed dances in history, she's also written extensively on inspiring creativity. Her book, The Creative Habit, describes creativity as not being a gift from the gods, and instead being something that has to be cultivated through preparation and effort. Tharp sees creativity as something that has to be sustained through a daily routine of exercises that are ritualistic and self-reflective. For Tharp, creativity is seen and inspired through activity and taught through practice, actual physical practice. Tharp states that a daily routine is as much of a creative process as the lightning bolt of inspiration, and that the best creativity is the result of habitual practice, which is why I routinely start my day off with coffee and a moment of introspection. But there are more specific exercises, such as choosing a name for your creative persona or doing a verb in order to feel the impact of its action. Or games like Chaos and Coins, where you toss coins onto a table and try to find meaning in the result. Tharp also calls for a disruption of normalcy, like covering all of your mirrors, or spending an entire day being a belligerent contrarian to everyone around you. Or my favorite, shaping yourself into an egg. Tharp's book is chock full of interesting exercises for creativity, but if there's one crucial takeaway from the book, it's that creativity has to be habitual, or else it will disappear. While Tharp's book has been celebrated for its ability to provide practical advice for developing creativity, I'm not so sure those kind of exercises will work in the classroom. I mean, our students will probably get a little hyperactive if they have to do those.
No. Monsters.
Marvin Bartel, an art instructor at Goshen College, also specializes in teaching creativity. Like Tharp, he sees creativity as something that is cultivated rather than being inherent to the person. Bartel focuses on teaching creativity as a thinking process, which I think has more of an application for our students in the classroom. Now, Bartel's idea of a process is a bit different than what I think many of us see as a process in education. A lot of times we like to give students an end product that we want them to reach, give them a step-by-step process for getting there, and then celebrate their work when they reach that end product. Bartel rejects this idea. He does not see imitation as something that leads to creativity. Showing a series of exemplars or end products that the students need to reach is what Bartel calls image flooding. And he says that this actually hinders creativity rather than inspires it. Okay, so if I can't show students exactly what it is they're producing, how do they know what it is that they're actually doing? How do we know what the assignment is or what the end goal should actually be? For Bartel, he has an idea of what the end piece is going to look like, but he doesn't want to show the students because he doesn't want to go ahead and give them what the ideas are and what the process is for getting there. What Bartel does is he guides students through a reverse engineering process for getting to that end piece.
Challenging Chris to replicate this exact dish with every ingredient in just 2 days. He'll be able to taste it, touch it, smell it, but at no point will he be able to actually see the burger.
He uses pinpointed questions to help guide student thinking so that they follow that path that a creative person took in reaching that end piece. He enables students to imitate the way an artist thought through a project without actually giving them a prescriptive step-by-step process. By doing so, students find an inner inspiration for completing a project. They find creativity within themselves rather than having been given the process that a teacher says, here's how you be creative. Think about it this way. We can give students the opportunity to use art in a science or an English or a math class, but if we show them examples from before with previous assignments, then they're going to already think about what it is they're supposed to produce. In terms of being original and creative, that type of creativity is not really going on in their brain. In essence, Bartel wants students to walk through the mind and experience the internal struggles that come with being creative. When you're truly being original and you're inspired to be creative, it's hard. You have to piece things together and you have to use your imagination and come up with ideas that match together that you never thought of before. You have to look at things in a different way. And if you give students the end product, they already see the end goal, and so they're not looking at anything new. As Bartel puts it, he wants students to steal the thought process and not the look of the work.
And I'm talking to you about how to think like a scientist. It's just a scientific method. Make observations, form a hypothesis, test that hypothesis, and analyze your results. It's just that simple.
Now, what this looks like across the curriculum is a bit nebulous, to be honest. But I do think that both Tharp and Bartel have ideas that could be applicable to our classroom. Ultimately, what I think they both mean is that for creativity to be cultivated, there has to be a habitual, structured freedom to the way a student approaches a problem. A structured freedom that leads to a specific process that's original to the student. Now, I find these ideas for inspiring creativity fascinating, but they're kind of useless unless we can write real lesson plans with them. It's not that the art world is so far removed from core subjects that we can't use their ideas. However, I do think there needs to be some honing in order to bring it into the classroom, especially when there's such a heavy emphasis on quantifiable methods and standardized results. Now, Bartel also mentions that in order to inspire creativity, it requires a teacher to change the student's habit of work. And I think it's here where we can begin to start thinking about real changes in the classroom. So let's think about a student's typical habit of work. They come into the classroom and they start with a bell ringer. It takes maybe 3 to 5 minutes for them to complete it and for the teacher to go over it. Next, the teacher delivers some sort of new content, right? They either do a lecture or a presentation, or maybe the students do a web quest and they're getting some new information. Then the students take about 20 to 25 minutes to do an activity to learn and practice that new information. Then there's some sort of formative assessment like an exit slip. It takes about 5 minutes and you've got your 50-minute class. Sound familiar? I know that's a very typical structure for my classroom. Now, there are many opportunities for students to be creative in our classes, and I know that we're already doing a really good job of activating that. But I do think Tharp and Bartel would have us all be more intentional in inspiring true original creativity in how students approach a problem. Benji Birgili, writing for the Journal of Gifted Education and Creativity, also touches on these ideas. She finds that particular instructional strategies activate creative thinking, whereas others activate critical thinking. For Birgili, she finds that students have activated their creative thinking when they are utilizing 3 elements. The first is synthesis, then articulation, and imagination. Synthesis is where students are bringing in multiple sources or multiple subjects to do something in the classroom. It might be combining math and science, or science and English, or maybe all 4 core subjects, or maybe even all of them across the board. Art, music, science, everything. Articulation is where students can communicate the unusual relationships between these multiple subjects in solving a problem. And the imagination comes in when students are thinking about new and original ways of approaching problems in order to solve them. Now, Birgili goes on to list particular ideas that activate this kind of creative thinking, one of which is problem-based learning. And I think it's here that we can start to see some real ideas for activating original creative thinking in the way that Tharp and Bartel both describe it.
Is this a school project?
Yes, and it's a requirement. And it may sound easy, but nothing could be harder. It will test your head and your mind and your brain.
What if we started a lesson with just a problem and invited students to come in and solve that problem? And instead of providing them with a structured step-by-step approach, we allowed them to explore their background knowledge and collaborate with others and to bring in specific skill sets in order to solve that problem. And what if we as teachers guided them through the problem-solving process by asking the right questions? Questions that merely push them to think creatively. Now, offering somewhat distant suggestions for how to approach a problem might seem a bit off-putting for students, but all too often students are given prescriptive ways of thinking in the classroom and grow bored with being at school.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression.
By setting students free to think openly about solving a problem, we can activate their creative thinking, which makes things a lot more fun for them in the classroom. So what would a lesson actually look like with problem-based learning? If it's not that typical everyday structure that we typically do. The lesson plan actually becomes simplified in essence. You give the students a problem to be solved, something that has an application to the real world. It could be something like, how can students at our school reduce lunchroom waste? Now, if you're thinking about scaffolding, students have actually already been scaffolded across their subjects leading up to this assignment at this point in the year. And then your guided questions could help point them towards learning the new standards by applying those standards to this problem-based project. So now if we set students free and encourage them to use what they've learned all year, they'll be synthesizing multiple subjects, they'll be articulating the problem in new ways, and then the students will definitely be using their imagination to solve this problem in new ways. Then the teacher's role is to guide students by asking the right questions that point them to thinking about this problem in a way that's solvable. And the teacher can also help with securing the right resources for the students to have.
We'd all like to thank you very much for everything you've done for us. And we'd like to give you a little present to remember us by.
So just how do we teach creative thinking? Well, we don't. At least not directly. Pointing them down a path that helps them on their own think creatively about something, I think, is the best way we can cultivate it in the classroom. And providing structured freedom on a regular basis can help cultivate creativity as a habit. And I do think we need more of that kind of teaching now more than ever. If you liked this video, please hit subscribe, comment, and like. I would love to hear from you with your ideas on how to teach creativity and what you're doing in the classroom to give me some new ideas and some new ways of thinking about it. I have attached a list of questions in the description box that help guide students through thinking creatively in a problem-based project. Thank you so much for watching this video, and see you soon.